I feel like a lot of people tend to overweight the value of an MBA in the short term and underweight it in the long term.
Hi, Trevor. Really excited to talk to you about Wharton and your MBA application process and journey today. I would love for you to start by introducing yourself.
Yeah, happy to. Glad to be here and super grateful to Leland. So it's always a pleasure. Name's Trevor Higginson. Originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, born and raised, and specifically West Valley. For those who are familiar with the area, I studied finance at the University of Utah, and afterwards got into the finance space, starting out at Ernst & Young, and then went and did investment banking at a Japanese bank called Mizuho, and then did secondary private equity investing at a place called Lexington. And after being there for a short amount of time, pivoted over to a tech startup in the Salt Lake City area called Omni. And what we were doing was serving the VC space, helping them with their investments and being able to monitor them and keep track of all the legal and economic terms of all those. And then last year we were acquired by JP Morgan, so ended up being an employee of them before jumping into going to be starting my MBA program next week at Wharton. And so went through the whole application process last year, and it was quite grueling and intense process, but thankfully with massive help from the Leland community, particularly Chaz Foote, who was my Leland coach, and then also help from friends, family, and other coaches on Leland. I was able to get into Wharton after applying to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton.
Amazing. I love that you kind of started out very traditional finance and then have done so many things in such a short amount of time. That kind of dovetails into my question of why did you choose to pursue an MBA program? You've done a lot. You might argue that you don't even need one at this point in your career. So why an MBA program, and then why Wharton in particular?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I feel like a lot of people tend to overweight the value of an MBA in the short term and underweight it in the long term when they're considering whether or not they should get an MBA. I think the MBA is obviously very valuable coming out of the program, being able to get into another industry if you want to switch industries, or be able to keep rising in the ranks in your same industry. But over the next 10, 20, 30 years, I think there's going to be a huge amount of value that's going to come from the MBA for me and anyone else who decides to pursue one. And so for me, I'm trying to get now very tactically from a small startup that got acquired and get into kind of the big tech space. I've seen what it looks like to be in a startup as a product manager, as a PM there, and want to be able to see what it looks like to be in a big organization, big tech, doing product there. And then eventually would love to be able to start my own tech company in the future, potentially.
And so why Wharton?
Yeah, so why Wharton? Wharton, I only applied to the three, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. I decided that if I didn't get into any of those, I just wasn't going to go and was going to continue rising the ranks in the product role. And I loved it at Omni. And so for me, it was very much, I only wanted to go to one of those three. And if I didn't, then I was going to go and it'd be fine. Wharton in particular, I was really excited about kind of the holistic experience with them. They're strong in the academics, strong in the recruiting, strong in the extracurriculars and the social aspect. And so being able to have this really well-rounded experience was really interesting to me. And focusing specifically on the academic side, I really appreciated the fact that they had a nice blend and mix of lecture style classes, the like team-based, very like group-oriented types of classes, and then also like a lot of cases thrown in there in the process. And so really enjoy kind of a mix. I had that mix when I was an undergrad, and that worked out really well for me.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's more common than a lot of people think to apply to a very narrow set of programs. But there's kind of another set of people that it's very much spray and pray, right? I'm going to apply to like 10 programs, and I'm going to hope that I get into one of them. Talk me through the process of Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, or bust.
Yeah, totally. So for me, I had already gone through so many different roles at different companies. I had tried out like a form of consulting at EY, doing transaction advisory services, and then was did investment banking, did a form of private equity, and then eventually got into product. Was lucky enough to make that jump before MBA school. And so having gone through all of those kind of steps, I could see kind of where I wanted to go longer term. And so with me being in product and being really happy about that, I just wanted to like really double down on that. I'd also considered trying to start a company while in MBA school and thought that might be a good way to kind of like leverage my time, being able to take out the debt while working on the company. That I've kind of scrapped that for now, and we'll maybe do that in the future. Um, but I felt like Harvard, Stanford, Wharton would give me the best bang for my buck in terms of brand, network, and kind of future opportunities for me, particularly, like because I was so laser focused on what I wanted to do, and also would have been happy if even if I didn't get into any of those, being able to just kind of keep going in my career path. Like I wasn't like I have to have an MBA to keep growing.
That's awesome. Wharton has a brand new entrepreneurship building, I think, being built too. So it's a rising star in the field of entrepreneurship.
Right.
You've kind of hinted that the application process is intense, and I think we know that it requires letters of recommendation and resumes and essays and a GPA and standardized test score. I mean, so much. And these aren't little essays, right? It's like, who are you in this world? So, at a high level, walk me through your application process.
Yeah. So for me, the process, I kind of had my eye on an MBA since probably my senior year in undergrad, and so had started kind of looking into the GMAT and but was kind of overwhelmed coming out of undergrad, and so jumped out of that process and waited until 2021 when I was transitioning from investment banking to private equity. And at that point, that's when I took 3 months off between those jobs and just studied like crazy for the GRE and took that 3 times, studied as if it were like a full time job, and finally was able to get the score that I was hoping for. And then in 2023 is when I started applying to schools. And so I reached out to, I'd kind of been following John Colliker on LinkedIn and seeing all the posts he was doing. And I started following Leland. And then we had a lot of mutual friends. And so he was interesting to me and I loved what he was doing. So joined Leland, saw him recommend Chaz Foote as a coach. And so said that he had done great. He helps kind of dark horses get in. And he had also gone to the University of Utah, such as myself. And so I reached out to him and he was kind enough to take me on as a client. And so he worked with me for months, trying to kind of hone one application particularly, which was the Stanford one, given that's where he had gone. And I felt like it was the most intensive. So paid for that one and just grinded, worked really hard with him and did tons of brainstorming. He kind of acted almost like a therapist for me, kind of thinking through my whole life story and like pulling out kind of underlying themes and motivations. And he helped me get really in touch with who I am and what motivates me and what's important to me. And by doing that, a ton of groundwork ahead of time, I was able to then work on my essays. I started down this one path for my essays, and I thought it was going okay. Then I read it to my wife, and she said, "Nope, that is not MBA quality. Like you got to redo that." So I totally pivoted thanks to her recommendation, and also with guidance from Chaz, and kind of revamped the entire essay. And that was kind of the path that we decided to go with, and it worked out really well. Really good flow, really good content, and Chaz was refining it the whole way through and helping guide me and helped pick me up when I felt like I didn't have anything left to give to the process. helped me figure out my recommenders and helped me choose who I should prioritize and how to go about giving them guidance on what they could potentially write about. And then once I got to the interviews, once I actually received invitations to interview at Harvard and Wharton, was able to then reach out to the broader Leland community and got coaching for my Harvard interview and then also for my Wharton TBD interview. With the Wharton TBD, I did a practice interview with a coach and another group of other students that were, or potential students that were applying. And that was massively, massively valuable. I would have had no idea what I was doing if I had gone into it without doing that. And also the Harvard interviews as well, that I did several practice ones beforehand. And that was very, very helpful as well.
That's great. We'll go into some of these application pieces more specifically, more granularly. I love, though, that you've kind of highlighted how long this process really can and should take. The more time you give yourself, the better of a chance you have, because like you said, it takes multiple iterations. You should not expect your first essay draft to be the one that you submit. You have to do interview practices. Like, there's so much that goes into this over a really long period of time. You said that when you graduated college, you were planning on taking the GMAT, which is pretty traditional for people with finance backgrounds. But then when you actually took the test, you went with the GRE. Was that an intentional decision? If so, how did you decide between those two tests?
Yeah, so when I very first started studying for it, I took some courses coming out of my undergrad. I was pretty, like I said, pretty burnt out from my undergrad and kind of wanted a little bit of a break. And so plus, I was feeling very overwhelmed by the whole process, and particularly because of the GMAT, because it had its, I can't even remember what it's called now, but some kind of reasoning that was very difficult on the math side. I realized very quickly that was not my strength. And so looking into both of them, found that to all of the top programs, at least according to what they would promote, they said that they were agnostic about GRE versus GMAT. With the GRE, I just felt like it played more to my strengths, being that it focused more on the vocab, on the verbal side, as opposed to grammar and sentence structure, which I felt stronger on the verbal. And then on the quant for the GRE, it wasn't quite as difficult as it was on the GMAT. And so I'm not as strong from a quant side and much stronger on the verbal side. And so I was able to lean on that. I also was wondering if, because there's only 25% of applicants that use the GRE versus the GMAT, that if I did exceptionally well on the GRE, I would hopefully skew up their averages more than I would if I did fine or even exceptional on the GMAT, given just the way averages work. And so I was hoping that would also work in my favor.
That's interesting. Did you take a practice test of both the GMAT and GRE before making that decision to go in the direction of the GRE?
Yeah.
Is that something you would recommend to most people?
Yeah, I would highly, highly recommend taking practice tests for both and just getting a sense for which one feels more playing to your strengths. I think there's zero reason to choose the GMAT just because most people do. Play to your strengths, only take the test that is going to be doing that. And that's the only thing you should really consider, I think.
You were about 1 year late too. I think they removed most of the integrated reasoning section out of the GMAT for the GMAT focus.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Wharton, now I want to dive into some of these application components. Wharton has a little bit more of a unique application in a couple of ways. On the essay side, they're known for these bilateral complementary essay prompts. So what will Wharton do for you? And then what will you do for Wharton? Can you tell me how you approached these essays and anything that you did to try and stand out?
Yeah, in terms of both of them, I spent a lot of time getting to know Wharton. They have a lot of, they're very unique in that they are very student driven in a lot of the experience. And when I say that, I mean there's tons of clubs and they're almost entirely run by students. They'll new clubs are springing up all the time. And they cover so many different interests and lots of different experiences that other MBA programs don't necessarily have. And so being able to understand, okay, what does this program have that's going to be valuable for me, and being able to understand that, and then thinking through like, okay, what courses do they also offer, and how does that play into what I want to do long term, and being able to speak to that and making that connection, making that very clear to Wharton that this is going to be incredibly valuable for me personally, because they want to see you succeed. They don't want you to come in and fall on your face. And so John talks about this a lot, where they want you to be kind of like inevitable in terms of your success. They just want to be able to, I think, ride that wave with you and be able to be that brand that's on your shirt as you go and ride that wave. And so I got really familiar with them, spoke to a lot of people that had gone there, people that were currently there, and got a sense for the culture. And then in terms of being able to know what to give back, all of that research then fed into, okay, now I understand what makes up Wharton and the Wharton experience. What can I give in terms of my interests and my skills and my past experience to help give back to the community, which is a really big part of the Wharton experience.
I want to reiterate one thing that you said that I think is super important, and that's that your reasons have to be hyper specific to your story, your background, and your goals. If anyone else can have the exact same why this particular school, why an MBA is you, then it's probably not specific enough. So I love that you said that. Talk me through how you went about gathering that research, talking to students, talking to alumni on the website. What were the most effective channels for you to do that research?
Yeah, some of the most valuable stuff was in terms of the clubs and the classes was just Wharton's own website. They have an entire portion of their website that is dedicated to clubs. You can see who's like the current presidents and the like all the classes, all the clubs that are offered, and you could potentially even reach out to them. I think they have their contact information on there too. I didn't personally, but you could. And then like looking at the courses they offer and being able to see what of those courses align with your interests and what you're planning on doing after MBA school, and being able to lean into those and say, these are the courses that I am most excited about because I want to do X thing. That course is going to help bridge that gap from where I am to where I want to be. And so that was super helpful. And then in terms of speaking with Wharton alum, being able to just find people on LinkedIn and just like your traditional networking that you do on that if you're trying to get a job, just like same thing, just like reach out to the Wharton students. Very happy to talk to the people who are coming up after them. They know exactly how hard it is to get through this process. And so if they are able to, they're usually very, very happy to offer up some time and advice. And then also just like I have like some friends and family that are, related to the Wharton community. And so being able to talk with them and hear about their experiences, even though it's dated, given it's kind of back in the day, still being able to hear kind of what got them excited and being able to translate that to my own excitement as well was really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Not only how it was for them back in the day, but also like how has being affiliated with Wharton impacted you well into your career, I think is another interesting perspective to get.
Totally.
You've talked a little bit about your letters of recommendation process, and I know Chaz kind of guided you down this too. Talk me through, how did you decide on your recommenders? How did you prepare them? How did you get the strongest possible letters of recommendation?
Yeah, so Chaz and I, to be able to figure out which recommenders I should reach out to, made a short list of people that I'd worked with in the past and focused on my last couple of jobs. Didn't go further back than that, and thought through what relationship did I have with them, what position did they have in the company. Obviously, did I work with them directly, which I would recommend only asking those people to write your letters of recommendation, given the schools are very explicit about that, and kind of thought through their own personal abilities to write, their writing abilities, and their kind of voice, and making sure that would resonate well with AdCom. And so after figuring out that list, kind of narrowed it down to a couple, one from two different employers, which I thought would give kind of a variety of inputs and perspectives. And then after identifying them, reaching out to them and asking them very kindly if they would be willing to do that, given it's a huge time commitment and it takes a lot of effort for them to be able to come up with a good letter of recommendation for you. And so big sacrifice on their part. And so they were kind enough to accept. And then Chaz helped me come up with a kind of a prompt doc for them based on the questions that were specifically being asked of the 3 schools that I was applying to, and kind of giving anecdotes, like quick anecdotes about each of those questions or different parts of my time being at those companies, working with them, that they could leverage while writing the letters of recommendation, not to be able to like copy wholesale, but to be able to kind of just get the juices flowing in terms of being able to write those letters. And yeah, it worked out great.
That's great. Do you feel like asking those 2 people from different employers did give that kind of complementary perspective that you were hoping to get?
Yeah, totally. With Chaz, we were able to identify like 4 or 5 of my personal attributes that I really wanted to highlight in my application process, and kind of made this like matrix where I was like, these are the attributes that we want to kind of hit on and want to bring to the forefront for the AdCom. These are the ways that we're going to potentially do that. And, letter of recommendation is one of them, your resume, your application itself, your essays, and trying to say like, okay, for this attribute, which of my parts of my application are going to hit that attribute and like really make that one shine, and not having too much overlap across all of them, kind of being spread out and being able to hit all those attributes. And so that letter of recommendation was part of that, and being able to hit kind of 2 separate parts of my list with those 2 different letters of recommendation based on the stories that I provided them they could leverage.
Yeah, two kind of great things I think there. First, I think a lot of people think about each application component in a very isolated way, when in fact it's way more compelling if you do think about it as a very holistic process. So how do your letters of recommendation complement what is being said in your essays and what you're showing in your resume? Thinking through how those can go together, I think, is really powerful. And then the second thing I think is letters of recommendation people are so afraid of them, I think, because you can't control it's really bad to write them yourself, and then you have to kind of relinquish the writing to someone else. But you can go into it more prepared and kind of lead them toward ways that they can show that they can highlight your traits in a compelling manner. I think through the chart that you and Chaz did and being intentional, these are the characteristics I want to show in preparing a recommender prep doc. All of these ways can help you make sure your letters of recommendation are compelling, instead of just like, please write me a good letter and then hope and pray that it's a great letter. Is that, would you agree with those?
Yeah, I would be truly terrified if I just said, can you just write me a letter of recommendation, just like letting them do whatever they wanted on that. Plus, they don't want to have to do it that way either. Like, that's a ton of work on their part, where they have to like think back. Like in one of my cases, you would have had to think back like 3 years at least and try to decide like, okay, what is the most valuable things I could write about? And like, do I even remember that much about us working together at that time? And so it was crazy helpful. I got feedback from both of them. It was crazy helpful to be able to reference those stories, those anecdotes. And I also like provided a list of like all the projects we worked on together so they could just like jog their memories. I just want to make the process as easy as possible for them. And it was like, just like one step away from like writing it myself for them. Just like, here's all the raw material you'll need, like just throw it together.
Yeah, that's great insight. Best for both parties, I think. The Wharton TBD, a very unique interview, only one of the M7 that does any kind of group interview. Talk me through, you said you did a mock interview, but talk me through the prep that went into it, what the actual experience looked like, and any kind of reflection looking back on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was the most unique, like you said, of the interviews that I'd prepared for. And it's kind of interesting because you are going into it with a group of people and you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know how you're going to all interact together. This is your first time ever meeting. And some people may have prepared more than others. And so for me personally, it was nice I reached out on Leland and found a group that was doing a mock interview for the TBD. And we all went into it kind of cold and totally bombed it. It was awful. But then afterwards, we received, within like the next hour or something, we received written very explicit, very like helpful and actionable feedback and advice about how to improve the process. Not and in addition, she also like spoke through it, but she like provided the feedback written as well, which is super nice. And basically said like, these are the different roles that you need to have in the TBD. You need to have a note taker. You need to have a time checker. You need to have someone that's like keeping the ball rolling. You need to also be like gracious and let other people speak and like give time, like call out there's someone in the group to speak who hasn't been speaking so they have time. Like talk about all these things that would kind of shine well and reflect well on you as a potential candidate in the interview. And so she basically highlighted that Wharton wants to make sure they're not hiring a bunch of cutthroat jerks. And so, or not hiring, rather, they're admitting a bunch of students who are going to be collaborative. They're going to not try to step on each other's toes, not trying to push each other to get to the front of the line, and want to make sure that we're all collaborative because that's what the classroom is at this point. It's very collaborative at Wharton, a lot of team-based things. And so I wanted to make sure that we're good team players. And I think the TBD really nails weeding those people out appropriately.
Was your TBD remote?
Yeah, they only did it remote when I was applying. I don't know if they're not doing that now, but
yeah. How was that process? I'm sure it can be hard to be collaborative over Zoom. Any tips for people that are going into a Wharton TBD in the next couple of years?
I would say biggest thing is practice. Find a group, either create your own group, or I would highly recommend using Leland, finding a good coach there that has had a lot of practice with this and giving good advice, and doing some practices. And then other than that, just make sure that your internet is super stable and that you're in a very quiet and, distraction-free space. Make sure you bring a pen and paper, be able to take notes, and go into it as prepared as you possibly can.
Yeah, we've helped thousands of MBA people at this point, and I think if there's one thing that I could tell everyone about interviews, whether it's Wharton TBD or any other school, is do a mock interview, please. I think it's so helpful to just get all the thoughts out, do a rough run. It will help you get way more polished and put your answers together. And getting feedback is so helpful early on. It feels like a cheat code almost. It's so powerful. As we've talked about, it's a very long process. It's a very kind of convoluted process. There's a lot of moving parts. What did you feel like were some of the biggest challenges that you faced kind of over this application process, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I would say every step of the way has been challenging, just in its own way. With the GRE and like studying and taking that in and of itself was incredibly brutal. I wish that I had known about Leland coaching at that time. I tried to use a different coaching service, and like after a couple of sessions was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. And I had to go it on my own. But for sure using a coach. Like I cannot overstate how valuable that was for me. It was just having someone that's gone through the process recently and that could like kind of hold my hand as I was going through and give me the support that I needed and the guidance. Another massively difficult part was just the essay. Like the essays rather, doing that introspection, figuring out like a really interesting narrative that was true to me and that was kind of unique to me and highlighted a lot of different aspects of myself, and was able to package that all up in, a few hundred words or 1,000 words. That was very, very difficult, like getting that refined. And so having people who, friends, family, coach, who could kind of review that stuff and kind of check me on my language and my word use and my stories I was using was massively valuable.
I appreciate talking through that. The essays are brutal. Who are you and why should we care in 300 words?
Exactly.
So to finish us off, would love for you kind of open floor, any high level advice for next year's MBA applicants and Wharton applicants more specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest advice I could give is take the time and give yourself enough time to go really deep into this process. I know there's some people who can do this in like a month or less. I was not one of them. And giving myself sufficient time, like I started technically in 2018 and then was able to really get deep into it in 2023. Giving yourself the time to do that introspection, to take the exam, to work with a coach, that's critical. And really being intentional about why you want to get an MBA and understanding that, being able to speak to that yourself instead of just like, oh, just because I feel like it's a good idea. Like being able to articulate that well makes it so that the whole process is a lot easier. It's not going to be easy, at least it wasn't for me, but it makes it so that it's much more doable. And then lastly, again, I keep saying this, but like get an exceptional coach that you work well with and that works well with you. And I literally don't think I could have gotten into Wharton if it hadn't been for the help that I got from Chaz and several others. And so that'd be my biggest few pieces of advice. And then in terms of speaking to Wharton specifically, getting to really, really understand the program. I think Wharton especially, you've really got to understand like what the student experience is like as much as you can as an applicant, and being able to speak to that and make it so that the AdCom understand that you understand the Wharton community, the culture there. It has seriously a phenomenal culture that they've been working really hard to build and are now really working to preserve.
That's amazing, Trevor. So helpful. Thank you for being willing to share your story and talk us through your application. I can't thank you enough.